So what we're going to be working on today is fixing my car, because the last time I drove it to a Cars and Coffee in Alameda, where the roads were pretty bumpy and there was a bunch of potholes everywhere. So I blew out both my tie rods and got a bubble in one of my tires. So for that, I got new GK Tech bump steer tie rods and the M14 inners, so hopefully they stop bending. And then I also got new front tires, just the same thing, Federal RSRRs in the same size. Also, the last time I drove this car, I took it to my friend Jason's house and he redid the exhaust for me, but I drove it without a bumper and I accidentally ripped my headlight harness out, so I got a new set of HIDs to replace that. And I also got a Yashio factory water temp gauge that I want to put in, because I have I don't trust the stock gauge at all. And this is a V1 gauge, which in my opinion is the cleanest look because it has the biggest numbers, so you can't miss the temperature. Then I gotta put my Nardi back in because I've been using it on my sim for a week. Oh, and then also I gotta replace this shift boot thing because mine is torn. It's leaking transmission fluid all over my car. And then I have a torn coupler that I have to replace too. So this is the bubble I got on my tire from just all the potholes that were on the road. There is another one on the bottom, but yeah, that's the bigger one. What me and Alex are gonna be working on first is swapping the tie rods, because that's probably what's going to take the most amount of time. Then afterwards we're going to do all the little stuff. So Alex and I just got the tie rods off of my car. I used to run ISR ones, but to be honest, they're pretty much garbage because this is the third set I had and they always get like blown. This one's actually good. They always get blown out and like loose, and the outers keep having a bunch of play. One thing I already noticed is they have a little bit more bump steer correction in them than the ISR ones. So I'm gonna try out the GK Tech ones for once. What I'm probably gonna do is cut the GK Tech ones to the length of the ISR ones just as a base. So what I'm gonna be cutting these to is 9 inches because that's what the ISR ones are at. So I just taped it and I put it in a vise. Then I'm just gonna use a angle grinder and cut them right at the line. So I didn't realize it's time for my tire appointment, so I have to go take these to the tire shop to get them mounted real quick. I already cut one of the tie rods, but I made the mistake of cutting on the wrong line. So it's about 1 inch too long. I don't want to record at the tire shop because that's pretty awkward, so we'll be right back. And we're back. So we got the tires mounted. They kind of overcharged, so I don't want to shout them out. And now I'm gonna start cutting the tie rods again, since I did accidentally cut this one on the wrong line, and I still have to cut the other one. So now that we got the inners cut, we're gonna go ahead and throw it all together now. So I realized I never centered the rack on this car since I had it. And while the outer tie rods aren't connected to the knuckles and hitting the bump stops, I'm gonna quickly throw my steering wheel on and turn it lock to lock just to center the rack. And then afterwards, I'll sort out the rest of the suspension to make sure I could get even lock on both sides. One thing that I did that's optional is I put the boots on the outers just because I do drive this car in the rain a lot. And yeah, it's pretty easy. You just have to unthread this nut, this, basically take everything apart, and then you just slip the threads through here down like that, and then just work this around the bearing. If you want to see how to exactly put this boot on, I did show it before in a previous video of putting the angle kit on Alex's car.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
So I just put the outer tie rod on the other side with the wheel, and I saw that it's like super towed in. So I'm gonna have to cut the tie rods a little bit more. I'm not sure how much, so I'm just gonna take a guess and hope for the best. So we just recut the inners about another ½ inch, and we're threading on the outers. So I just got the inner and outer back on. Now I'm just gonna be throwing my spacers back on. I run stacked 25 and 15 mil, and then we could eyeball align this thing. It's been a few hours since the last clip. Everyone already left because it got pretty cold and I leave the garage open. So I was done working for the day, but then I got pretty bored in bed. So I'm gonna work on the headlights, putting the HIDs and everything on, and tidying up the wiring because it's pretty much a mess. But one thing I did find is I have a pretty bad power steering leak coming from these lines, which isn't too big of a deal because I did find some spare OEM lines in my parts bin, so I'm gonna swap these tomorrow. I don't have that much room in front of the car, as you guys could see, so I can't fit my tripod here to record. Here's a before of how the wires are. These are for the high beams, those are the low beams, ballast. I got all these wires just kind of tucked away. On this side I have the high beams here, all this wiring mess. And yeah, and then I figured out why my HID stopped working, because this wire came loose, which is the power from the actual battery, and it burned up the fuse along with the actual like module or whatever this thing is, which shorted out the HIDs. And to replace it, I got the same HID kit, so I think I'm just gonna replace the harness and leave everything else for now. So this is what I'm gonna call it. Sadly, I couldn't get it like as good as I wanted it, but this should work. I have the high beam ballast in the crash bar now, and the wires tucked up in there. The low beam one is underneath the actual body of the car, and I just have all the cables zip tied to the body. And yeah, I think it's way cleaner than it used to be. So it's gonna be our second day of prepping today. Last night everyone left because it got pretty cold. Today I'm gonna try finishing up my car, so I'm gonna fix the power steering leak and all the other little stuff. Then Alex brought a welded diff that he wants to throw in his car. While Alex is over here taking a breakfast break before he starts doing his welded diff, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on my power steering leak. So I'm gonna pull the intake out, probably by the turbo, and then start replacing all these lines. So I found what's causing my power steering leak. If you look really closely, you can see that this is like ballooned out from this hose. So I'm gonna pull this out and then we can get a closer look at it. So I just got the 2 power steering lines out and the one that goes from the like cooler line to the actual rack over here, and they are pretty worn out, like they're dry rotted and cracking on both of them, or on all sides. This one was the worst. I thought was leaking, and you can see it's like split, and same thing here, and they're like bubbled, and the little one too. Thankfully I am kind of a hoarder, and I had the little one already like in my shelf and this one. So I'm just gonna run to Nissan real quick and see if they have the one that I'm missing. And Alex, he already started on his diff, but he found out that his driver's side axle is blown. But thankfully I have like a spare one, so we're just gonna swap that while we're putting the diff in. So I just finished spraying my entire engine bay with degreaser so all the spilled ATF could get cleaned out, since it did make like a sludgy mess. And then Alex pretty much has the diff almost ready to come out, but we're gonna quickly go to Nissan to get the one hose I'm missing. We just got back from Nissan and O'Reilly's. We went to Nissan first, but sadly the line I need, 1 is discontinued, 2 it's Sunday, so they were closed. So we went to O'Reilly's and just got a generic like power steering line that we're gonna cut to size. I personally like to run like all OEM lines, but just can't do anything about that. So this is the like line I got. I'm just gonna cut this to size. The old lines were like super hard and I didn't want to reuse it, and I like cut it to get the inner diameter since they were kind of stretched. But yeah, hopefully this all works. And then also I quickly like, I guess washed or cleaned the engine bay on this side just because it was super sludgy. Ow, ow, ow. So Alex and I just got the diff out of the G35, but I noticed that this camera was off even though it was like I turned it on, so it probably like died or overheated or something. But yeah, we got that diff out, and then this is the blown axle. You can see the boots ripped, but thankfully for Alex, I am kind of a hoarder, and I have two sets of 350Z axles, so we're chilling. Then also, I got a little carried away and I started working on the hoses. I replaced the lower one already, cut this upper skinnier one and got that on, and now I just had to put the one other thicker hose and it's done. And before we actually put the diff in, we're gonna fill it with like 1.5 quarts of whatever diff fluid this is that Alex got. I don't know if it's good or not. Well, yeah, we got the diff in. Alex just went around the corner to test it out real quick. And now I think we're just gonna clean up, and I'll start recording again either when I start working again tonight, if I do. So the gauge I'm gonna be running is a Yashio Factory V1 gauge. The reason I like the V1 is it has basically giant numbers you can't miss, when the V2 and V3 have like corners, and it's kind of harder to read them. Plus this one's like just cooler. The way the Yashio Factory gauges work, and the reason I like them, is they plug into the actual Nissan console port. But for some reason this one's not working. It just says one and it flashes, and that's about it. So I think I figured it out. I plugged it into the console port on the wiring specialties harness on the passenger side, and it started working, but it is kind of like on and off. And I think another problem is there's a split in the wires right here that I have to look into. But yeah, I'm probably just gonna repair the wires real quick if they are split, and then run it from here all the way up to on top of the steering wheel.